Tonight, Thursday, the 23rd May. Welcome to Uplate with Sion Marshall. We have two very special guests who will be joining us a little later on in the program. But not before I give some initial comments. Tonight is going to be a good one, and Uplate with Sion Marshall begins right now. So good night, good night, good night, good night to everybody who's logged on, who've tuned in to this edition of Uplate with Sion Marshall. Whether you're on YouTube, on Facebook, on Asbot News Network, and sometimes you joined on Old School FM. Welcome to this evening's program. We have a fantastic program in store for you. Now, a few comments. Now, you've seen me a couple of times use my Uplate with Sion Marshall mug, right? Yeah, well, the mugs are available. And you can order your mug if you want to support the project now. It's up to you. However, starting this week, after tonight's program, we are going to launch a competition where two lucky individuals will get their very own Uplate with Sion Marshall Cup. So two very lucky individuals. Now you'll hear more about it after tonight's program. You just need to stay tuned and you will hear exactly what you must do to win your very own Uplate with Sion Marshall mug. Now, I do not have my mug tonight and I don't know why. Because usually, I have my little sippings inside of it, you know what I mean? And I can sip throughout the program, even though most times by the time I get to the middle of the program, whatever I'm drinking is cold. But that's fine. But I don't have it tonight. It's my fault. So that you don't get to see it. My fault. But that's all right. Next time. So you could be one of the two lucky individuals who would win that mug. Now, the thing about it is this, right? It doesn't matter where you are. Once you win, I will get that mug to you. Whether you're in the Caribbean, whether you're in North America, if you're in the UK, as long as you are looking at the program and you win that mug will come to you completely free, compliments our program. All right. So keep watching and you will hear the rules of how you can win your very own Uplate with Sion Marshall mug. All right. Now, I saw a very curious headline recently. Someone sent it to me, as a matter of fact, because you would appreciate I am not able to scroll through social media and so forth as often as I used to because I'm so tied up now. But someone sent it to me, and it was a journalist from Eyewitness News complaining that about the fact that, according to his article or his whatever that was, I'm not sure if it's a editorial or what have you, that the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is spending $100 million to host Bangladesh. And he described Bangladesh as one of the weaker teams that is wrestling with the West Indies cricket team at the bottom of the pile. And that's an interesting take. That's quite an interesting take. Now, two things I want to question. First of all, is he correct in the $100 million figure? Because I heard the Minister of Finance on it, and it was nowhere close to $100 million. I think at the time it was closer to 30, 40 million EC dollars. But uh, Kenton Chance of Eyewitness News has reported that it's about 100 million. Now, I am not sure if costs have ballooned since the last time I heard the minister speak on it, but I'm just telling you what I heard from the minister and found it a bit strange that that was the figure that is on his blog. The second thing that I question is the way it is being characterized. You're spending $100 million to host a weak team. Sorry. Now, the truth is, or my understanding of what is happening is this: St. Vincent and the Grenadines isn't hosting a West Indies Bangladesh series. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is hosting matches of the ICC T20 World Cup. Now, if anyone is following cricket, by now we know that T20 is really growing fast. It is surpassing Test cricket in many jurisdictions, and even one day cricket. Stadiums are packed all across the world, whether it's in India for the IPL, Bangladesh, Pakistan. Stadiums are packed with people watching their domestic T20 leagues. So can you imagine what the expectation would be for a World Cup? So St. Vincent and the Grenadines is hosting the A group in the World Cup and will also host games in the knockout stages. Now, what St. Vincent and the Grenadines is doing is being done across the region where countries are hosting these games. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, Jamaica, and so forth. Well, I know Barbados, for example, has done significant work on the stadium, which is already, you know, up to a certain standard. They have night games and so forth already. And then you look at the US building a brand new stadium to accommodate the T20 World Cup. Think about it for a second. Think about it for a second. And remember when Brazil hosted the Football World Cup, or France, or wherever this World Cup is being hosted, these countries build, they do not only refurbish, but they go into significant expense to build stadiums. So I found it a little curious that a journalist would characterize, first of all, an international competition in the way he did, as if it's to suggest that it's just Bangladesh, as opposed to hosting games in the World Cup, a popular sport, cricket, having a global competition with some of the biggest names in world cricket being playing in those games. We do not know which teams would end up in the knockout stages. It could be South Africa. It could be Australia. It could be England. We do not know. But what we do know is that at least two games would be in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And so, what happens when uh, Australia or New Zealand or South Africa plays in the knockout games in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Does the headline change? And is it now a situation where, well, we spent $100 million to host the number one and two teams in the world, India, Pakistan? I really found the headline to be curious. But you know, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I follow a lot of uh, media. I was in the media. I am in the media for myself. I'm into talk radio. You know, I was press secretary to the prime minister and so forth. So I follow the media. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines media is special. It is one of, I don't know about many others, but it's one of those group that believes that it should not be held accountable. And so any criticism or comments on journalistic work is met with, oh, you want to know more journalism than me. Oh, I'm the one with the degree. Oh, I'm the one who went to study. But these are the same people who think that they have the right to criticize governments, to criticize ministers. But you never ran a country. You don't hold a ministry. Nobody voted for you. Yet, you have that right. You have that right to speak on everything, not just reporting the facts as stated, but commenting, criticizing. However, the minute you dare speak on the sacred profession of journalism, you rebuffed because you never studied journalism, because you never studied communication, because you don't know this and you don't know that. And in truth, many of the egregious actions are basic common sense. We know when you lie. We know when you misinform. We know when you have an ulterior motive. We know. And so it was disappointing at best to see a headline like that. But next week we should be having cricket. We should be talking cricket on this program. And I would put up, hopefully, get more context around what St. Vincent de Grenadines has spent on the upgrading of the stadium. And we will talk more about what can be expected when the World Cup starts. So listen, that's next week. I just have to comment on that before I bring in my guests. Now, remember I told you tonight I have two special guests with me, and ideally I wanted to actually be in their presence because they're actually here in the UK, and I really wanted to be in their presence and sit down with them and chat with them. But the distance, the time, and so on made it difficult. But they've consented to stay up late with us tonight. And so joining us now are uh, Minister of Education Curtis King and the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, my brother Myccle Burke. Now, I've known Myccle Burke for a couple of years because years ago, when we were younger, we took part in one of those public service week competitions, and we did the mock parliament, and Myccle didn't like the political part of parliament, but I seem to enjoy it. And Myccle said, "Listen, that's not my thing. I'm on a different trajectory." But tonight, joining us, staying up late, Myccle Burke and Curtis. Now the lighting ain't the best because they're behind them, but we're going to make the most of the presence here with us. Curtis, Myccle, good night. Unmute your mic. Your mic is muted.
Good night.
Good night, Sian. Good night to viewers, listeners.
Well, Curtis, Minister King, comrade, before you came on, I was commenting a little bit about the upgrade that I am seeing happening at Annisville, and I'm really excited by them. Finally, St. Vincent and Grenadines is going to have a stadium that can rival any stadium in the world and can truly exploit the opportunities of sports tourism by hosting, as we now start looking at the CPL, the Caribbean Premier League, which is fast growing. We can now start looking at hosting some of those games and even international games here in St. Vincent and Grenadines. But I saw an article where on Eyewitness News where Kenton Chance was commenting negatively that, so you want to tell me you're spending $100 million to host Bangladesh, which is essentially one of the weak teams battling West Indies for last place. How does that make sense? And I was commenting on that because to me, I believe the way it was phrased, the way he characterized it was misleading because one, we're not hosting a Bangladesh series, we're hosting the World Cup. And for any major sporting event like this in the world, countries who win, countries who bid, do undertake significant improvements to their infrastructure to facilitate the World Cup. So I don't know if you saw it, but what's your comment on that, if you have any?
Well, I haven't seen it, but I know the general gist of the discussion because I've heard persons, and it would appear that persons are short sighted in terms of the value of what is being done. But let me first of all say, Sian, that that project is being done in Western George. And I continuously made the point during the 2020 elections that campaign that look, what we are seeing in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is the transformation of our community, transformation of our country. And I made the point that look, where Western Georgia is concerned, you can identify three distinct features of that constituency. I'm not going into the details, except to say that at the southern end of that constituency, you can see the transformation towards the development of a major city. And we identified that, look, that city, the focus is going to be on wellness. Yes, we coin it as a wellness city. And we identify that the anchor project here would be the acute referral hospital. And we also give the solemn pledge that we will enhance the Annisville facility to allow for the one hosting of major sporting activities, as well as to make it also part of the whole idea of a wellness city in that part of our country. And it is unfolding before our very eyes. Now, let me speak specifically to the Annisville playing field. Sian, that field was opened in 1972, right? And we commenced by hosting international teams here. India, well, New Zealand first, India. And those early set of matches were at the level of Windwards and so on, playing against these international teams. By the time we were able to host one day international, we hosted in 1980-81 an important match versus England. Let me remind persons, England had contested the 1979 Prudential World Cup finals with the West Indies, and we had given them a good beating. And most of the players in that 1970-19 team was in St. Vincent and the Grenadines 80-81 series, and that won the match. Still goes down as one of the better matches played in the Caribbean. We won the match by one run. By one wicket. Sorry, one run. One run. Because Holden bowled the last wicket. But after that, we had several other teams, including Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. The point I'm getting at, we had become accustomed to hosting matches. And our field itself, our playing facility, was described at one time as the second best picturesque facility in the world, not just in the Caribbean, That was the ranking. Now, what that did for our national psyche was significant, to the extent that people became accustomed to seeing international cricket and other sporting events at Annisville playing field. However, as sporting development and sporting events, as they continue to evolve in terms of the hosting and what is required for hosting, it became necessary for us to enhance that facility. I remember people used to be saying, we can't get any matches because we don't have lights. We can't have any matches because we don't have enough hotel rooms. We can't have any matches because we don't have the necessary sporting supporting facility like the gym and so on that is well equipped. And we could go on and on. And what that did, it started to impact on our psyche. People start complaining because why? They start comparing what was happening in Grenada, who came after us and start hosting international matches. St. Lucia, who came after us and start hosting international matches. Dominica, people forget these things. So, in the whole, I would say, National Developmental Trust, where we have always said, we're not better than anyone, but nobody better than us. either. And in the whole scheme of things, it became necessary for us to provide this sort of support to sports, not just in terms of infrastructure, but as you can see, we have been doing a lot of work in terms of encouraging persons to get involved in sports, providing training and all the necessary support to bring us to that level where we could feel proud as the Vincentian component of the Caribbean civilization, that we too can host international matches like we used to do in the past and do so properly, so that those who narrowly see and make the point about you're spending so much and so much money just to host a team, they are being short-sighted, because what we have done is to provide our Vincentian people with a facility that we all can feel proud of, and that is going to be with us for a long time. And so when it comes to hosting international matches, and even us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as you were rightly pointing out, organizing certain national activities, when we look at what we are doing with regards to tourism and the trust towards the broadening or enhancement of the tourism product, all these facilities, including this one, will be playing a role. So I don't really get swayed and carried away, because what is happening as we continue to produce in a positive way, those who have a negative view and those who always act, well, I would say adopt the position that we can't do and we can't do and we can't do, they are going to find justification for that kind of attitude. And a lot of times the justification are going to be expressed in the view that they're wasting money to do this or that. So to be honest, I couldn't care less listening to that kind of, what I would say, negative vibe. I'm more interested in seeing the positive impact, feeling the positive impact, contributing to the positive impact that this facility is going to have on our young people, our middle-aged people, all of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as we continue to transform St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That's how I would answer that.
You spoke at length about it, Minister King, and I'm glad you did. But it was important for me to raise it because I think, first of all, the unfair characterization of it needed to be addressed so that individuals understand it's not about hosting Bangladesh, it's about hosting a global competition with multiple matches being played there, firstly. And secondly, we have this habit of comparing what other countries have without acknowledging the expenditure that those countries made to have what they have. Whether it is a stadium, an airport, flights coming into their countries, and we compare our country to those countries. And then when we make the effort to have similar features, it becomes, oh, but you're spending money. You have to spend money, unfortunately. But that was a plug for Western George. And it seems that you wanted to take the whole program to plug for Western George. You want to talk education. You have your PS there with you, and I wanted to talk about education. You and PS Burke are currently in the UK. You are were attending a seminar. Care to give us a little bit about what that seminar featured?
Well, basically, it was a world forum on education, as persons might know, if they don't know, what has happened over the years. The British government came up with an initiative that seek to bring persons from throughout the world, educators and other related fields, to look at education, to examine the challenges existing, and to look at how we can improve what is happening in education by sharing and interacting. And when I say sharing, sharing best practices and in terms of how you deal with the different issues confronting our education system. And this started some 20 or so years ago. The 2024 edition is coming at a critical point in the development of education generally in the world. And perhaps I shouldn't say development, I should use the word the transformation of education, because you would know, Sian and listeners, that we have set ourselves some very ambitious targets that we are anticipating to achieve by 2030. I talk about the Agenda 2030, or what people call the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular, goal number 4 that relates to quality education in the world. Now, this is 2024. It is basically 4 years since the COVID-19 pandemic confronted us, and it's 6 years before 2030, the deadline set for us to achieve these targets that we have set ourselves. So 2024 is like a good time, a good year to assess where we are, and to look at what we need to do to get us closer to achieving these targets. Clearly, coming out of the pandemic, it was recognized that, look, we had challenges before the pandemic, but what has happened during the pandemic is that these problems were multiplied and they were given even sharper focus, because we were now in a situation where, like no other time previous to this one, we have experienced the sort of interruption to face-to-face instruction that we had during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we were forced to come up with other modes of delivering our education. And it became necessary for us to examine what was done during that period, to look at what losses we experienced during that period, and to see how we could recover from that period. Clearly, I mean, you have close to 200 independent countries in the world, and we all had to come up with creative ways of ensuring that our students, our young people, were exposed to education even during that difficult period. And some of us were very creative, some of us were less so, but it is useful to look at our collective experiences, examine them to see where there were strengths, where there were weaknesses, and to look at how we can build on those strengths and how we can fill the gaps created by these weaknesses. And I want to just end this opening part by indicating that in the march, in terms of the march forward, if I could use that phrase, of modern technology, we employ modern technology to help us to deal with the challenges experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have the view that it is not if, but when we are going to experience similar disruption to our school. So it is important that we look also at the technology and the advancement in technology to see how we could use this technology to help us to address some of those issues that we saw coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic and which we are expecting to be with us as we move forward. So I would just say that by way of introduction. I'm sure PS will want to speak to the issue also.
Well, I'll bring PS in, and he can use his introduction to address this next question, because you raised the issue of COVID and the fact that the pandemic emphasized or exacerbated whatever gaps or deficiencies existed within the system. We had that period. We coped quite well, and not forgetting it was followed almost immediately by the volcanic eruptions, which uh, then required an extension of those methods being employed. But we've been in the clear almost for about 2 years. So my question to the PS, as he introduces himself as well, is: are we back? We've had this term with tourist arrivals and so on. Are we back at pre-COVID levels? Are we back to the level of functionality that our education system was at before COVID? And having come out and recognize what those gaps were, how better are we to address them now that we're out of the pandemic?
So thank you very much, Sia. So the question being asked is, are we out?
Are we
And
out?
it's an important question, but it's a difficult question to respond to because COVID is still very much present. COVID is indeed the new normal. Pandemics seem to be the issue that is synonymous with these times. But what we saw, and Minister alluded to that, is that whatever gaps, whatever deficiencies existed in our education system, they were exacerbated by COVID. So are we back to where we were prior to COVID? Yes. In some regards, we are back, but we are back in the sense that we were on an upward trajectory. We experienced learning loss as a consequence of COVID, as a consequence as well of the explosive eruption of Lasso Fair. We witnessed during that period, evident in our external assessments, our external examinations, and the grades that we saw coming out of these assessments, these examinations. We saw a decline in performance. What we witnessed last year, though, is that we are steadily getting back to that upward trajectory. So if we use the statistics, for instance, we'll say that immediately after COVID, we had passes at the CSEC level in the vicinity of about 60-something% passes. And that's CSEC. But in our last external examination at the CXC level, CSEC in particular, we see that we are now within the 70 percentile. So that's an indication that we are getting to where we need to be. We're getting to where we were. But the journey is still a journey of meandering pathways that we have to employ different strategies, different techniques, using the technologies to not only restore our education system to where it was previously, but to move beyond. COVID has presented us with an opportunity to reflect, to assess, to respond. What
Now,
we,
yes, sorry.
sorry, what we saw from the discussions held at this Education World Forum, we saw that the issues that confront our education system in St. Vincent and Grenadines, they are not unique to St. Vincent. We heard from different countries that there are issues surrounding numeracy, there are issues surrounding literacy, there's issues surrounding repetition, issues surrounding attrition, issues surrounding the technological divide, resource deficiencies or resource deficits. These are some of the things we heard echoed in the many discussions, in many enlightened discussions.
Now,
But
you,
Sian, I
yes.
wanted to add though to the issue of the functionability of the system, whether we are back. And I would say yes, in that we have the schools, every one of them, reopened. They are adequately staffed. In fact, our last check, when we look at, if we look at numbers, the student to teach, the teacher to student ratio at both the primary and secondary levels are indeed of advanced or developed country standard, because you're talking about one teacher to every 12 students at the level of the secondary schools and one to every 13 at the level of the primary school. Those are good indicators that the government is making a valiant effort to ensure that the schools are not just up and running, but they are adequately staffed. And not only that, that they are staffed with well-trained teachers. Look, the primary schools, you have well over 60 or 70% of those teachers trained and trained at the degree level now. Similarly, you're getting the same sort of figures at the secondary level, where most teachers now are trained at least at the university level. And perhaps I should have said at the primary level, you talk about trained teachers starting, Sian, at the teachers college level. And these teachers go on to the university level. Now, it is true though that in some subject areas, we still have shortage. And we are seeking to see how we could deal with these issues, okay? Especially as it relates to attracting these qualified persons to the teaching profession, to teach in those subject areas where you would have a challenge. So, and we have these schools up and running. We have them staffed by teachers and trained teachers. And we are also constantly enhancing the physical structure of these institutions. As we speak, we have recently, and when I say we, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we recently negotiated a loan from the Saudi fund that includes a significant amount, $37 million, that will go directly to education including an allocation of over 2 million to go with what we already allocated.
US.
Yeah, 2 million US to go with what we already allocated to school repairs. Out of that 37 million also, we are going to be building in Union Island a technical and vocational education and training facility. We are also going to be building a new school in the East St. George constituency. That is a constituency that has no secondary school.
Minister,
So,
let me cut you straight, because you're
mm,
listing a number of things that I think most individuals are aware of. And by the way,
mm,
Eastern George is already quite a mecca because it has primary schools and it has the premier institution, which is the college. So I mean, it's already way ahead. But
mm,
if we look at the expenditure,
mm,
and I'm talking about the fact that the government has built or refurbished a number of schools. As a matter of fact, over the period of governance, millions, maybe hundreds
mm,
of millions of dollars have been spent on
mm,
either building brand new schools or refurbishing the schools.
mm.
You commented on the percentage, the level of teacher training that we have now,
Yes,
not just at the teachers college level, but at the university level,
university level.
Yeah.
significantly surpassing
Mm,
whatever was in the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
mm,
So you have improved infrastructure, improved teacher training, you
mm.
have significant expenditures all around. The government is assisting teachers, Vincentians in general, including teachers, to get trained at university level. Are we getting a bung for a buck? Because you still hear comments, and based on some of these statistics, you get this sense that if you look at the input, we're still lagging on output. And why is that? If my assessment is correct, you
Oh,
may see it
mm.
differently, and if you do, then let me know.
Let me give
Okay,
some statistics.
okay. Well, Piers will give some. You were going to give some
I'll
statistics.
give you some
Yeah,
statistics.
only to say though, I don't want to miss this, and that's why I usually take the time to list them. We also enhance the remuneration of teachers, but
Absolutely.
I'd let Piers give some of the stats that are coming after.
So let's start with the teachers and the number of teachers. In 2021-2022, according to information provided by our Statistical Digest, we had a total of about 872 teachers at the primary level. At the secondary level, we had about 925 teachers.
So we're looking at possibly about 1,800 teachers.
But those are teachers pretty much on the establishment. We had an additional 200 and something teachers who function as relief teachers.
Okay,
So we're looking at something close to over 2,000 teachers.
2,000. Yes.
But that number has gone up. The number has gone up because we're able to employ additional teachers. And those teachers who returned to the education system as well resulted in further increases in the number of teachers. So what does that mean for the education system? It means that St. Vincent and Grenadines is indeed satisfying the requirement of the student-teacher ratio. Now, at the secondary level, that ratio is, as approved, it's 1 to 14. At the primary level, it's 1 to 13. But we have in excess of 2,000 teachers. At the primary level, we have about 13,000 some students. At the secondary level, we have about 9,000 some students. In fact, the statistics point to the fact that we are experiencing a decline in the number of students within the school system.
Okay.
There was a time when at the primary level, you had about 16,000 students. And we're seeing the reverse happening, that there's a decline. But while there's a decline in the number of students, we're seeing an increase in the number of teachers. So it satisfies the requirements of the student-teacher ratio. But let us discuss now.
No. Before, please remember what you're going to say, PS, because I want us to clarify that. Now, Curtis, back in the days when I was a teacher and you were a teacher, I believe the ratio was about 1 to 20 or something like that, 1 to 25.
1 to 25
Right.
and so.
Now we're down to 1 to 14, 1 to 13. Now, just for
And
clarification, that does
hold
not
on,
mean that
hold
every
on,
class.
hold
Yes.
on. Those are, as Pierre said, 2021 figures. But I know the latest check we check is 1 to 12 and 1 to 13.
No, just for clarification, I want the listeners to understand that that doesn't mean that you may not walk into a school and see a class with 20 children.
Exactly.
Because we're looking at an average. But on the other hand, you will go to a school, let's say like a Canon 1 secondary, or you may go to a Westwood primary, or you may go to a Dorsetshire Hill, and you'll find 5 children in a class,
1 to
7 children in a class, and so forth.
Yeah.
So it balances out. So we're looking at the average of teacher to student across in Vincent Gradings. And to move from 1 to 20 and 1 to 25, I have taught classes of 36 and 38 children.
Well,
I have repeatedly.
one time.
So now that we're down to 14 and 13, which means individual attention is possible. So I just wanted to clear that up. PS, go ahead.
But even beyond that, right? With funding from the World Bank under the Human Service Delivery Project, we employed in some school teacher assistants to help to enhance the education product and the quality of instruction, and so that students can get further assistance in their development. So we're dealing with the statistics again. And what we note in the school system, we see challenges experienced, particularly in grade K, where there's a 4-point-something% repetition. But that 4-point-something% repetition, which is the highest level of repetition at the primary level, is not a figure that you can look at and take at face value, because you have to consider what are some of the factors that would result in this. And some of the factors, as indicated, is early entry. So there are students who may not necessarily reach the age to enter into the school system, but they get an early exposure. And sometimes with discussion, parents and principals or leadership of the school, it may be deemed necessary for that student to have a second chance per se, so that they can develop properly and they can go through the school system, in a seamless way. But the next grade of challenge really is grade 4 as it pertains to repetition. And all this is information provided in our Education Statistical Digest, where we see a 3-point-something%. But because of universal access to secondary education, we have almost 100% of students, and indeed, for the longest while, 100% of students matriculating into secondary schools. But what we see now is a disparity between the performance of males and females at the secondary level, where if we look at the number of females exiting the school system with the minimum of 5 CXE level passes, we see a higher percentage of females exiting the system with 5 or more subjects than we see among the male counterparts. So it tells us that we have to consider now, how do we keep males interested? So that's why we're now looking at emphasizing technical vocational education and training. But there's some interesting statistics there as well too. The interesting statistics point to the fact that at the level of external examination, CXE, you have more females leaving the school system with passes in TVET. But the government is emphasizing TVET not as an alternative, but as an opportunity for nationals to develop competencies that are much needed for our labor market. So that's statistics again. And I was speaking about the upward trek, the trajectory, where we see now a resurgence in the performance at the external examination level. And it is trending in a positive direction. A very positive direction. And if we look at the statistics are telling us that. But we see concern in the area of mathematics, for instance. And this issue of mathematics is not one that is localized. It is regional and it is international. And we heard that coming out of the discussions. We have locally, if we say that we say an average percentage pass in mathematics of maybe 31%, but there's a regional percentage pass rate that is below 40%. So the question is asked, what has accounted for the poor performances in mathematics? Mm-hmm. We see the opposite happening by way of literacy, where there is positive performances, positive performance trends. We're seeing that. But what we are grappling with, what we're trying to understand, what appears to be unfathomable, if we want to put it that way, is what accounts for the abysmal performances in mathematics.
So if I were to use the old people slang, it appears that before people could reckon but they can't read, now they could read but they can't reckon. Now we have a few more minutes left, right? And when you were talking before the program, Curtis, you were saying, half an hour, and you see how quickly an hour has flown.
Yeah.
There's a trend, and there's more, by the way, to that discussion that you were having, PS. In the US, they're talking about the STEM subjects. In the UK, they're talking about the STEM subjects, and those are the areas: the science, technology, I think what engineering,
mathematics. Yeah.
Right. So there seems to be a significant decline or lagging in those areas, and countries, even developed countries, are facing that challenge, and that's a big discussion that we're having. But I want us to focus for the next few minutes, and we don't have much, on another area that has been trending, and that's of inclusive education. And I know the Fairhall Primary School had a pilot project with that a few years ago. Exactly where is St. Vincent and the Grenadines on inclusive education, where the idea is to mainstream learning divergent children and not segregate them outside of a mainstream education.
Okay. Quickly, let me say that, Sian, the whole issue of accountability, as you mentioned, is one that we'll come back to sometime in the future. But it is engaging the attention of the ministry. Although sometimes, people focus more on the anecdotal rather than the raw data, the statistics, so that sometimes people come to a conclusion it might not necessarily be so. Of course, we have challenges in the system, and you always tend to highlight these, right, without necessarily looking or putting it in the wider context of things. But as I'm saying, there's a next discussion given the short time that remains. But where inclusive education is concerned, first off, let me say that yes, and we do recognize that in keeping with what we have been saying, that no child should be left behind, and no child shall be left behind. We are focusing on every single area of our education system. where there are students who are at a disadvantage because they cannot access the education. So whether it's rural communities that don't have science labs, we are moving towards correcting that. So whether it is the children who are in need of special support to allow them to access education because of their different labelness, if I could use that term, we are also focusing on it. And what we have done, we have some initiatives. Yes, you mentioned Fairhall, there's Beckwith, and there's also at the secondary level at Georgetown Secondary and Adelphi Secondary. We have, for example, at the Georgetown Secondary, we have 2 blind students, and I didn't say visually impaired, 2 blind students who are participating at the secondary level. Yes? And they're in the top stream. And they're not there because somebody felt sorry for them and put them there. But they are there because they deserve to be there. They work to get there. And we also have a visually impaired student at the Adelphi Secondary. In addition to, we have ADD, attention, students with attention deficit disorder, as well as blind students at Fairhall, and so on. Beckwith, we also have some mentally challenged, and so on and so on. So we have the initiatives. But what we have done is 2022, we are 2023, we signed an agreement, a letter of intent, if you like, with the Ministry of Education in Cuba, where we are going to get the assistance of an expert in special education to come to St. Vincent to walk alongside us, to help us to put together, well, basically to assess what are our needs and to help us to formulate a strategy out of which we'll have a plan of action dealing with these things. I must say though that we also had the support of the Education Management Unit, Education Development Management Unit out of the OECS. They have provided great support. In fact, they conducted an assessment basically to identify how many students who are challenged, whether it's dyslexia, whether it's those who are blind, who have hearing impairness, like those students who are autistic, you name it. So they did an assessment so that we can say in the different countries how many students have these different, I don't want to call them, let me put them challenges. Okay? And that also is going to feed into the work that we are going to commence in September with the export from Cuba, walking alongside our people. Now, I want to mention this too. What we are doing at our various schools, we are having ramps built, and in some cases, we have lifts to take our students who are physically challenged to the different levels of the schools. I mean, we talk about Fairhall, not Fairhall, Barley, where we repaired those 2 schools down there, and we made sure that a lift exists at one school so that where we have students physically challenged, they could move from one level to the other. The same thing is being done at the Sinclair Dakin Secondary School. The same thing is being done at the Beckway Community High School. So we are tackling these challenges at all the different levels.
Mm.
Right.
So more and more schools are becoming wheelchair friendly. And
Yes. Well, and we have ramps at several of those schools. But once
right.
we are doing repairs to schools now, we are ensuring that that facility is in.
Yes,
All right.
quickly say I'm sorry, but the whole inclusive education is defined differently by various persons.
Right.
But we have to look at education in a holistic way. What does the product inclusive education looks like? So if we use the 2021-2022, we saw a figure of a little over 100 students enrolled in the 3 special needs schools in St. Vincent: Beckway, Georgetown, Kingston, with Kingston having the largest number of students. But we're expanding education, we're expanding the education product. We recognize that there appears to be a stigma attached or associated with students who are differently abled. And there's a general reluctance on the part of parents to enroll these students in the education system, in the special needs schools that I just communicated. I don't think that the figure there represents the total number of students or children in St. Vincent and Grenadines who are challenged by different impairments, different impediments. But we're looking now to see how these students can be integrated into the other schools. And this is what inclusion, this is part of what inclusion is about. We're looking at the whole issue of equity. So we have to provide these students with the resources that gives them an equal opportunity to perform, to excel, to grow. So this is what we're doing. So through funding from World Bank, we had the inclusive pilot in Beckway. We have funding as well from the TX Foundation. That's a foundation out of Taiwan, where we will be providing the Fairhall School with much in the resources.
Well, not fair alone, all the schools where we have those students.
Yes. Right? But while we're building inclusion in schools, we have to go beyond the school and build inclusion in our society. And we've attempted to do so as well too. Because at the Fairhall School, for instance, we have someone who is visually impaired, who is teaching the students at the institution.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Right?
Fantastic.
So that's a demonstration of the government's commitment to inclusiveness, not just at the level of schools, but at the level of society. And I think it was about 2 years ago, with funding from the World Bank as well, we had persons who had hearing impairments or hearing impediments, right, enrolled in a TVET offering. And we had in excess of 10 persons who were enrolled in TVET offerings who had some sort of impairment. And that again is presenting education in a holistic way and not narrowing the scope or limiting education and the trust of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Sian, another point just one short point.
Really out of time, but quickly, because
yeah,
way
just
over
one
already.
short point. Just one short point. I wanted to make the point that look, sometimes people forget that under special needs, we also have high flyers. Those students who are exceptional, which our system do not cater for. We have to be honest and say that. We are also looking at those students too. So when we come up with this program that we're going to be working with our friends from Cuba with, we are also looking at those students.
All right.
And it's important I mention that.
Thank you so much, Minister King, P.S. Burke. Thank you guys so much for staying up late with me this evening. And by the way, Minister King, just so you know, I launched this program back in 2018. And of all the programs I did in 2018, and even now since we launched, you are the first politician to be on this program. So,
well, I have customary and being false a lot, so don't worry. I'm always available once. Even though you give me short notice, I would
that's fine. I know you would. I know you would. You would not never turn down an opportunity to inform the nation.
But we are traveling only tomorrow.
Really, yes. I'm really happy that that you took the invitation yourself and the PS. And as I said, I really would have preferred to be there in the midst with you guys doing this thing. But I really appreciate you accepting. Thank you so much, guys, and all the best. Safe flight tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now, that was Minister of Education Curtis King and his PS, Myccle. Now, we way over time, but I have to say this. Last weekend, Taiwan, the Republic of China, Taiwan, one of our very good allies of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, swore in a new president. I want to congratulate the government and people of Taiwan and the new president of Taiwan. And I must say, I look forward to the same fantastic relationship that continues to grow, to blossom, to develop, and to offer significant rewards and benefits to St. Vincent and the Grenadines to continue well into the future. Until next week, when we are back with you with another edition of this fantastic program, Sion Marshall saying, have yourself a good evening and good night.